Good morning, everybody. So I don't really have a presentation, but I have, because I think both between Dr. Kishore and Dr. Lakshmi Narasimhan, they've said everything that there is to about the Banyan. But I do have a set of questions and thoughts that I would like to leave with you, because we're going to spend the next 3 days together, and I think there's going to be great opportunity for us, therefore, to dialogue, debate, and arrive at perhaps at some solutions, or at least continue to engage in this conversation post the conference. So the first question that I have, and the first thought that I have, is linked to this very sacred binary position of the institution being juxtaposed with the community. And with one or the other being accorded higher status. So I think it's now time, really, because it's somewhat frustrating. We had, we have over the past 200 years engaged in this debate. We have in India itself a lot of data and a lot of scrutiny on how large total institutions have operated over now about 100 years. And from the Bhor Committee onwards to the National Human Rights Commission and reports, we don't have very encouraging feedback. And yet we continue to engage in this debate. So I think there is a need, therefore, for a shift in debate to understand what healing care spaces ought to look like beyond these binaries. Should there be decreased numbers? Is it personal attention? Is it the kind of human service professional? There is clearly a hierarchy within the mental health system. Should those hierarchies prevail? Should we flatten those hierarchies a little? So from being focused on large institutions to no institutions, should we transition into healing spaces such as the ones that we've now initiated with the National Health Mission, which are integrated within the public health system, which only accommodate about 25 people. There is personal attention, there are person-centered goals, and there is a multidisciplinary team where social determinants and post-discharge care is focused. So can the debate shift a little? And can we then look at reforms? Because really 100 years, or even longer, maybe 200 years of discussing confinement is, I think, sufficient. My second broad point is the long-term care issue. Somehow we behave like we have this ostrich sort of mentality where we pretend that this is not going to be an outcome, even the Banyan. And when I say we, I begin with us at the Banyan, right? So therefore, in relation to point one, we have experienced ourselves the damages associated with a total institution. When, like Lakshmi mentioned, we were at 100, but when we got to a 400, we saw care slip. We have some of the peer advocates seated over here who spoke about disruptions in care and loss of dignity when a very burdened human service professional responded with apathy and sometimes even with aggression. So I'm therefore speaking from laying bare our experience and speaking from the Banyan experience and not so much pointing fingers at state institutions. That's in the context of the first. But in the context of the second, we've seen clearly that there is a largish number that's going to be requiring long-term care. Now, what happens to them? We do have the notion of rehab homes across the country, but merely referring to a center as a rehab home doesn't make it any different from an institution. Therefore, what exactly do we mean when we refer to an institution as a rehab home? Should there be a better social audit system that looks into what these homes stand for as symbols? and what services these homes provide? Is community inclusion, work participation the goal? Or are similar sorts of segregation that one experiences in total institutions or mental hospitals also prevalent in rehab homes, just with a different name? Therefore, social mixing not being promoted in a rehab home, or even for that matter in a home again? Now, an institution, even the model that we spoke about, Home Again, can at times turn into an institution, even if it is just 4 or 5 people. But if the care approach, or if the philosophical underpinnings aren't sort of rooted in a culture of social mixing, of participation, of free expression, right? Or of embracing neurodiversity. So when we speak rehab homes, do we just speak the structure, or do we also speak about the culture of care? So if we could, over the next couple of days, speak about what really rehab means, what culture of care means, and these are not problems that are unique to India, these are global problems. So homeless people with mental health issues who experience the sort of distress that they do here, that Dr. Kishore and Dr. Narasimhan have outlined, is exactly the same in the US, and sometimes even worse, because many of them are on the 9th floor of prisons, right? As a result of being able to access care only when they are, they are sort of in conflict with law. Okay, so from there I move to my third point, which is social determinants, which has largely been clustered as a huge monolith. And we have papers and data and a lot of rehashed literature over, again, a 60, 80-year period where we focus on structural barriers and systemic barriers and violence associated with caste-based, gender-based, class-based differences, especially relative poverty. We were sitting in a group, amongst a group of mental health service users, peer advocates, and care providers. And one of the ladies, just day before, and one of the ladies there turned to us and said, I have been working since the age of 13. I lost my parents early. I was married to a very good man, and I had great support from my partner. He took very good care of me, but then he passed. And after he passed, I was left alone and had to take to a job. And, take to a job again. And when I did, I found a lot of satisfaction. And today I have an income of 1,20,000 rupees annually. So that is about 10,000 rupees a month. And then she said, on television, I've been watching these videos of recent events where I'm seeing a lot of monies being splurged in crores. So the experience of relative poverty, of me in context of the larger social system, and why is my lot as miserable as it is when there is this 1% that lives with access to resources the way that it is. We have spoken about the impact of relative poverty on mental well-being. We have spoken about many other social determinants, many other systemic barriers. But what really have we done about it? Is caste going to disappear? Are the class differences going to be bridged? Well, these are difficult thoughts and sometimes intractable problems. So how are we going to get past that? Redistributive justice? Affirmative action of what sort? The Chief Minister's allowance of 1,000 rupees certainly is something that people seek. The out-of-wage allowance or the disability allowance that people refer to as I prefer to refer to it as an out-of-wage allowance because it sort of makes it a little more permanent in the context of abject poverty. What happens with this 1,000 rupees and how much does it serve that person? Should that increase? Should we head towards basic income for those who aren't employed or don't participate in the workforce? That's my third question. I have just 2 more. The fourth, we spoke about research. In the context of research, I think all of us sometimes are not able to put our basic nature behind, which is really to protect and preserve our institution,
and our own personal interests, and therefore speak about our models and speak about a model being taken to scale and speak about the efficacy of the model. And in that context, cling on to it, spread a lot of information about it, and sort of be driven very strongly by the ideology and the flavor of that model. I think it takes a lot, but it's important for us to discuss ways in which I don't think it's about one model versus the other, but about multiple care approaches. And I think for a problem as complex as this, one needs to synthesize and bring together all these care approaches and look at ways in which the diversity of these approaches can service that individual, which is what Lakshmi really spoke about. But we continue to talk about Home Again being scaled up and ECRC being scaled up, which at some level is important because we can't move away from a pragmatic space. But as much as we do that, or talk about the Trieste experience, or Housing First, or open dialogue, but as much as we do that, equally, there has to be a sense of openness to embrace different care approaches that work. Because what works is what is essential. And therefore, as much as you highlight the model and its and good practices that emerge from it, equally please highlight the challenges and realize that there is no one model that serves all. And if we could just become a tad model agnostic. Finally, I think the last 2 points that I have is, can there be a platform such as this that focuses on severe mental illness and homelessness? Because it's so smothered with such sort of complex interplays and interactions. And therefore, we need to sort of problematize or sort of complicate the narrative. And in doing so, can we just discuss with a sense of honesty, mixed groups discussing with a sense of honesty, things that we are not comfortable speaking about, like what I mentioned about Home Again, for example. Let's say that's a great model, and there are 700 people who now are living great lives. There are very few walkouts. But in some cases, the care providers, even in just this limited context of 4 or 5 people, have gotten frustrated. And there have been sort of bouts of aggression on the part of the care provider. And some have been subtle and covert, but some have been over the top, and which we have been, quite shaken up about. And this is, again, human nature. Therefore, there is no saying when this could occur. So could there be a safe space and a platform where a climate of fear isn't cultivated, instead a climate of attempting to speak about these things as openly as we can, and knowing that we have to audit our systems, and therefore bringing the two together so there is open dialogue amongst diverse stakeholders of aggression, oppression, violence, inequities, hierarchies that could exist in a small place such as Home Again or in total institutions. I think this platform is absolutely necessary to advance mental health sciences. And the last point that I have is that we speak a lot about co-production, but I think in the context of mental health professionals or in any other context, it's largely tokenistic at many levels. The first level is just from a pedagogical point of view. I think most of the training is provided for care providers. And I somehow feel that the line should blur a little, and that the training should be provided collaboratively for care providers and service users, so that beginning then, the lines sort of blur and people are exposed to themes and topics that are actually universal rights and should be their rights as well. So if the pedagogy associated with training mental health care providers or professionals can blur lines a little, I think that would help. But also co-production from a tokenistic point of view in the global north, or in reforms and legislations that we have spoken about, that drive policies and care plans, Who is it who finds a seat at the table? It's usually people from the global north, a person such as myself or yourself, some of you from the global south who can speak in English, who are from a certain class. I still don't hear the voices of people that we serve. We will have many of them speaking over the next couple of days with translations, but we don't have those voices. And sometimes the attitude is patronizing. So you have reforms largely driven by ideologies and ecosystems that are prevalent in the global north. And I think it's time now for the global south to come together as a whole and to represent its views and perspectives and ensure greater representation. I'll just end with this, but I want to quickly say that we are meeting after a fairly long time as a group, and it's lovely to see familiar faces. We did have a conference in between, but somehow it feels like that wasn't, like the previous conferences. So I want to sort of mention that we miss 3 or 4 individuals who are now not in our midst. One is, of course, Keshav Desiraju, who was the architect of the mental health policy, and he was a trustee of the Banyan and many other organizations, and he is deeply, deeply missed. Then there's my guide, my PhD guide, Professor Parshuraman, the former director of the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, who would have been a very active participant in today. He is missed, definitely. There's Jerome from the Azim Premji Foundation, who was a very engaged partner, philanthropic partner. He's missed. And most recently, the loss of Bhargavi Davar, who was an activist. We disagreed on many things. We argued bitterly, didn't speak for months on end. But I think there was a lot of mutual respect and love. And her passing was really recent. And she's missed. And I think as a tribute to many of them and to the people with lived experience, we owe ourselves and them a platform where these questions and many more that you may raise ought to be discussed. Thank you.